Hi everyone, I'm Kushi, the host for this session of the 8X Pixel 360 Virtual Expo. So I'm extremely excited about today's first webinar on macro photography. We're joined by a very talented and accomplished group of underwater photographers. Today I'm here with Simon Lorenz, Brett Lobwin, Susan Meldonian, and our moderator for today, Ellen Lowe. So before we begin, let me just quickly introduce them. Simon is an underwater photographer whose photos and articles have appeared in magazines all around the world, and he has filmed for CNN and Nat Geo. He supports various NGOs and fights for the protection of sharks on the advisory board of the Hong Kong Shark Foundation. Next, Brett is a passionate and environmentally minded photographer, and he aims to represent marine life in its natural element, without demonizing or sensationalizing an animal to gain attention for the wrong reasons. He is a strong advocate of protecting our oceans by raising awareness around the impact of single-use plastics. So Susan is a photojournalist specializing in underwater and nature photography. Her images have been seen in many publications, and she has published 2 photo ID books of the strange and unusual marine life found at the Blue Heron Bridge in Florida. Susan has also won multiple prestigious awards for her work. And finally, our moderator for today, Alan Lowe, is a commercial photographer based in Hong Kong and a scuba diving aficionado. He has been selected as one of the world's top 50 underwater photographers on the Blancpain's 50 Fathoms. So now I'll pass it over to Alan to begin this wonderful panel with our talented photographers. The floor is yours, Alan. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. This is Alan in Hong Kong. Welcome, Susan, Brett, and Simon.
Alan.
Hey, Alan.
Hi. Welcome to 8X Virtual Expo 2022. I'm Alan Lowe, and we are talking about macro photography today. My screen is jammed.
Alan, you try to click onto the arrow. Yes.
Yeah. Working. All right. Sorry. So this is myself. My portrait photo. Okay. Just to quick introduction of myself. I've got selected in 2015 in Blancpain edition 50 Fathoms, and myself specialized in underwater macro photography. I'm an 8X ambassador in macro photography and a sea cam photographer and a member of the Ocean Artists Society in the US. This is myself on location in Mexico some time ago. While I'm at work, but unfortunately this photo doesn't show I'm having a macro lens. It's a wide angle pot. Okay, and this one is the it's a coconut octopus taken in land-based strait, and it's a marine behavior shot. You can see the tentacles is stretching, and the octopus itself is taking the shell, 2 pieces of shell from the sandy bottom, and to take it as at its home to protecting himself. And this one is the mantis shrimp carrying eggs. This is a kind of a very difficult shot. Why? Because the mantis shrimp itself usually carrying the eggs, always hiding himself. Very rare will come out to showing himself. So it's a kind of rare shot, and also it's a lucky shot taken in Indonesia land-based. This one is baby squid inside the eggs. Because for my own preference, I like to take behavior shots rather than we call it ID shots. This is the book cover for the Blancpain Art Book 2015. This is the cover shot. It's a saw blade shrimp on the piece of hard coral. This is a flamboyant cuttlefish inside the eggs, almost about to hatch out. And this one is the goby guarding the eggs. Oh, this one. You will see two critters here, two animals here. It's the yellowfish, tiny yellowfish, and the baby mantis. Obviously, this hole is a beer bottle. They are fighting, those two, they are fighting for the home. We'll see whoever can get in. This is a robust ghost pipefish. The one in front, near to the camera. This one is the female one, is carrying eggs. Is pregnant. Most of the shots I've been using a snoot, like a spotlight. This one considered is a super macro shot. As everybody knows, Pygmy seahorse is very tiny in size. The height is about 3 to 4 millimeters in height. Yes, thank you. That's my finish of my presentation. Thank you. And next speaker, I would like to introduce Susan from US, Florida, right?
Yes, and I have to put this back in the presentation mode. There we go. Oops. Okay, I need to share. Hold on one second. Okay, where is it? Here it is. Okay. Well, so I'm not sure what kind of things people want to know about. So I put some of my ideas together for people on my ideas and basic rules of thumb for underwater macro. I like to isolate my subjects. I'd like to seek good negative space. I like to use lines, diagonal lines, to make your eye walk through the photograph. And I like to find tight focus on the eyes in particular, or the mouth, whatever it is that's the main subject. But I like the eyes to be looking at me. I'm good color. I'm always amazed by images that the background is, other than black. I've been doing a lot of black water photography, so everything's got a black background in that. But I do love to have colorful backgrounds, because the ocean, when you look at it, is blue. And I love behavior shots. Alan, I love your photographs. And yours is, I love everyone's, but that was a nice presentation. I like to photograph a regular subject, but in an unusual way. And I think that also changing your point of view, I mean, it's a big deal if you can just photograph something and get it in focus, because the ocean's moving, the camera's moving, the water's moving, the animal is moving, and there's a lot going on, and you've got to try and freeze the frame of what's happening. So once you get all that down, you try to look at the point of view. You try to avoid distractions. You try to make sure that you're not photographing garbage in the, or, just trash that's in the picture, unless that's the subject. But also you can use your background to enhance your composition. And I like to anticipate the composition ahead of time. If I see something, sometimes I'll just find a nice, pretty background and then use that to and wait till something comes into frame. So for here, now here's where I took, it's a crab, but it's an unusual subject. I mean, it's a regular subject, but I took it to photograph in an unusual way. And this took me about a whole roll just to get this shot. Let's see. This is a starfish. And when I say taking a starfish, it's a regular, we see starfish all the time. They're not that, I mean, they're kind of cool to see, but I wanted to make it look beautiful. So I got in really close to get the bokeh background, and I just filled the frame with just the foot, because I wanted to see what it was doing in there. And every foot almost seems to have a little eye at the top. So I find out interesting behavior. Oh, I'm echoing.
A bit. Hey, Susan, I just quick question. Did you use like a close focus lens for that, or are you, just a little bit on the technique?
Just a 105.
Yeah, beautiful. Well played.
Thank you. Of course, I like behavior. The last couple of weeks, we were fortunate to find an octopus that was in a long metal pipe, and everyone here got a chance to photograph it. And I haven't been diving a lot, but I said I had to go get this photograph. So someone was kind enough to show me where it was. And this one, it kept moving and swirling. And I wanted to capture that motion, but get the center in focus. And that was a real chore, let me tell you. And you can't go taking lots and lots of pictures of the animal. So you've got to sit and wait. And then, you shoot off. What I do is shoot off to the side to see if I've got my lighting the way I want it, and then come back and then go over here and then back. Then people were lining up to take the photograph. And there was a lot of people kicking sand up with their GoPros. They don't know what they're doing. So I have to wait for the sand. And I was trying to, courting people away to get the photograph. And it becomes a chore, when there's a prize subject. So it's usually better not to let anybody know that there's something there like that. Otherwise, the animal's going to get photographed to death. Unfortunately, with an octopus, after the clutch hatches, the female dies. So it's a terrible thing. But
Susan, I think I've seen at least 5 or 6 photographers post regular pictures from this octopus in New Heritage. Seems like thousands of people have photographed this octopus, but doesn't seem like the octopus was minding the attention. Or did you have
it was in a very long pipe that was probably 4 foot long, and it was at the back end of the thing. Its focus is to just keep aerating the eggs. I don't think it's really paying attention. Like in my photograph, the eye is behind its legs. Some people would wait and get there early or go during the week or whatever to get the photograph, and wait till the eye was in the center and everything was all centrifugal. And that would have been great if I could have. I was more interested in this tattoo look that was going on with the inking of the eggs, the way, and trying to get a couple of eyes in focus and get some symmetry. And I love lines. So anything that's got you can feel emotion in this one. And that's why I like this particular image. And yeah, everybody and his brother photographed it. And this is a hairy blenny, and I photographed this with a snoot, the backscatter snoot, which was my first time ever using that snoot. And actually, that was one of the easiest snoots I've ever used. It was really a lot of fun. And one of the key things that you want to focus on is getting the eyes as close as in focus as you can, and learning the depth of field on with your camera, your rig, your setup, your lens, whether you're 4/3 or you're, full frame or not full frame. You have to learn your camera and spend the whole day just taking pictures of one thing until you learn that camera inside and out. And that's really one of the best things you can do for yourself. Now, this is one of my black water shots, and this, of course, is out in the middle of the ocean. We go out here in the Gulf Stream current, and we go out over depth. It's about 700 to 1,000 feet below us, so there is no reef. And if you drop something, you'll never see it again, and you can't chase it. And if a subject decides to take off because it sees your lights and it darts down, your ears are going to get a workout. So I've been doing black water for the last 5 or 6 years, and this is a sea angel, and it was actually spawning these eggs. And I couldn't believe my luck, because I just never thought I would get to see this. And I saw this little the sea angel. They're really tiny. They're probably between the size of a grain of rice to the size of 2 grains of rice long. And it's quite something to try to photograph. And this was just kind of hovering and almost attached to this, clutch of eggs, which was amazing to me. And I took several pictures of it, and it never left. It just stayed there. But normally, if you see a sea angel, as soon as they see the lights, they take off, and they're fast. They're wicked fast. One of your biggest struggles with blackwater photography is the speed at which everything is going, and you have to be ready to go and keep that finger trigger happy and be in focus constantly to get your shots. And this is another blackwater shot. I love jellyfish. I could photograph, if you put me and jellyfish, I could be happy all day long, trying to get all of the detail in these, in the tentacles. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to photograph this, and I finally got it, and I was just tickled silly, getting all the dottage, I call it, where you see all the little speckles. So it's a bit of a challenge to do this kind of work. You have to worry about your buoyancy. You have to make sure that you're not sinking like a rock. You have to watch your gauges. You have to watch your depth, and then you have your ears. And sometimes you'll see something, it'll look for the surface, and you can't rush that, because your ears are going to give you they're going to argue with you. And this again is blackwater also. This is a little nautilus. It's a female, and it's running. This is a salp underneath here, and it almost looks like it's running on a wheel like a hamster. But and the little ears here are the signal that this is a female. So it's a female nautilus that hasn't grown its shell yet, and the female nautilus has the shell, and the male doesn't. And she has that, so she has a place to put her eggs, and she can go up and go down. And the males stay small, and the females get a little bit bigger.
I love this kind of picture when it's like, it looks like something else. Obviously, it's not running on a treadmill here, but it does look like that. It really looks like a circus act. That's really
right?
cool.
I mean, in some pictures, I've erased all of the jazz in the background because I find it distracting. And but I've left it in for contests and whatnot, just because sometimes it's just fascinating. There's so much more. There's usually 9 things happening at once, and your job is trying to focus on one. This is another snoot shot, and it's of a jawfish. And one of the things I love to photograph, probably more than anything else, is to try and capture the spirit of an animal, and to get that sincerity or get an expression that it's making. I mean, these fish can look very angry and very pissed off because they've got a mouthful of eggs, and they're usually stuck there. And this one looked like, well, please don't take my picture. So it spoke to me, and I wanted to throw that in there, because I just, in both of its eyes, getting both their eyes in focus is a problem for most lenses, unless you're the right distance or have the right lens for that animal. And I was thrilled that I got both the eyes in crisp focus. And then this one I have to throw in there because during COVID, we couldn't go diving. So I went in the pool to try out some ideas, and I was getting buzzed by these bees kept going over my head, and I'd have to dip down, and they were like almost attacking me. And I thought, this is crazy. So I got underneath the water and went and got the tank, and I got under the water and I had the tank going behind me. And I just laid there, and then the tank wasn't working because the bubbles were blowing everything away. So then I went and I got a snorkel, and I just sat there with the snorkel. And this bee came down and it buzzed around in a circle, and it was just coming to just screeching to a halt, and it died. So they were dying. They were using the pool as their burial ground. Who knew? This is going on all day long. Unless you're paying attention to something, you don't know what's happening. So
actually, one of the photos that I'm going to have in my presentation, it was photographing seahorses, and I got stung on the face by a bee in the water.
Oh wow!
So that image to me, it evoked a whole different emotion, getting stung on the face and then blowing up. So there you go.
Well, at least they evoked an emotion. We're
True.
afraid of bees. I'm allergic to bees, so I was afraid it was going to fly into my snorkel. So I didn't, I was just waiting to suck one of those things down, and then what was I gonna do? But it was so cool because I couldn't believe I got the photograph, and then it came out, in focus. And I mean, this took me hours. I can't tell you how many times I tried to photograph this and to get it in focus. And just as it starts to die, it gets bubbles. So it lands. I have other photographs and there's no bubbles on them. And then like within a minute, they start to develop these bubbles. So, there's behavior going on around us everywhere. And then this is a conch. We have the West Indian fighting conch that come in here, and they do this whole spinny thing, and they come in they migrate here to spawn. And I'd never seen one out, and I'd never seen one have a face. I've never seen a conch with a face. I've seen the two eyes and the shell my whole life. I've been in the doing underwater photography 30 years. This is the first time I saw the whole animal out, and it was alive and kicking, and I didn't know they could do that. So I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, my name is Susan Meldonian. I have discovertheoceans.com and Night Flight Photographics. And thank you very much. And I guess now we shall turn it over to Simon Lorenz.
Me? All right.
Yeah. And then you get to introduce Brett.
Thank you, Susan. Some really cool pictures that I'm very jealous of. Hi, everybody. My name is Simon. I'm also an underwater photographer, amongst other things. We also have to be jacks of many trades, so we do lots of different things. We teach photography, teach diving, write articles. Now I'm doing quite a bit of video as well, but my main gig is actually running scuba diving trips. That's what I do all the time, which I had to take a big break thanks to a certain disease. But we're starting back now. So I'm finally getting some new footage again that is shot from outside of Hong Kong, because I am German, but I actually live in Hong Kong, bizarrely. And we do have macro photography here as well. And so that's pretty much the only thing I've been doing for the last 2 years.
Wait a minute, German? I thought you were Italian.
Yeah, it's my not very German look, I know I don't really give the typical German vibe, but that's my Czech mother gave me the dark hair. I thought when I was asked to present here, I was going to talk about something that I really enjoy in macro photography. So kind of like a topic for today, and that is playing with light. So, with my trips, they're mostly wide angle situations that we get. So I would say sort of 70-80% of the dives that I do in the year are wide angle. And I do love, the sharks, the whales, and all these things. The one thing that is different to macro, aside from the lens, to me, is the ability to play with light. Because when we're lighting up, let's say a shark, the only way we can light them up is from the front, from where we are. We don't have much alternatives except from maybe from the top, perhaps if it's a stingray or something, but otherwise it's always frontal. So if we look at like the picture that Susan has as a background, you know, it's a typical wide angle situation that we have. It's always lit from the front. We can, you know, play around with it a little bit, but we don't have that much options. Whereas in macro, we can control the whole scene. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, sort of the options that I really enjoy when we dive with macro in, like, you know, Alan mentioned Glenbeigh, obviously one of the best places in the world to get like lots of these creatures where you can just sit on the sand with the animal and play with the light and really give all kinds of different directions. So that's kind of the theme of my talk today. So the first one is a picture from a Wonderpuss taken in Ambon. And I used the snoot, actually the Retra snoot, which you can adapt to several strobes. And what the strobe has, it has a lens to channel the light, making it stronger, but it also has this cutout piece, like a shablon that you can put in and do different shapes. And that day I was practicing square shape. And the reason I picked this as my first image is one thing I really love about the snoot photography is you can highlight the subject in a way that you can't do otherwise, and you could never be able to do it in wide angle. It's very, very difficult to do that in wide angle. And if you think of, you know, like Elvis Presley or another star, like walking on the stage and, you know, the spotlight follows him, that's kind of what I have in mind when, you know, I do snoot photography. And so here I was trying forever to get something with that square shape, because normally the snoot's always round. And I was like, oh, cool, they've got square, you know, like what can I do to make, so I've got some other ones where it looks like somebody's entering a door. Anyway, it is my favorite. But it also shows typical light from above. You know, this is spotlighting the Wonderpuss. The Wonderpuss has all these funky arms normally that are super pretty, but that's all the Wonderpuss pictures have the funky arms in there. But I really love the face and the body of the beginning of the body, I should say, of the Wonderpuss, which is really unique. This sort of pattern stripes that goes along the body. It's very unique when you look at just that and you stop looking at the floppy bits. It's really bizarre, and obviously you can't see that in the photo, but it's pulsating. Yeah, so it's like it's rolling. These stripes are pulsating, and it's a bizarre animal, which is why that scientist called it the Wonderpuss, which is wonder in German, because, you know, it's such an amazing animal. Anyway, so here I'm lighting from the top, typical spotlight. But one thing that I've been doing a lot is backlighting with the snoot. So now you got to get a bit more creative. So you can use the arm. And when I tell people in workshops to, you know, try this out, people are like, well, why, how? Because we just think we have to be shooting from the front. But actually, we can be shooting from all angles. And so here I'm shooting from slightly behind, not quite behind, I'm getting to that in a moment, but this is behind the ribbon eel, shooting into sort of the mouth, but definitely from behind. And the amazing effect that you get is sort of see-through elements like the teeth, or these, I don't even know what you call these nostril bits that they have. They really crisp up and they come out. And I particularly love the teeth in this one. But what I also like is this outside shine that you get. So it's a silhouette of the animal, you know, getting created because I'm backlighting it with the snoot. It's complicated. You know, you got to set your camera up. You got to like put the arm really far out and point the snoot backwards. And, you know, I generally prefer that you practice it on your hand or on a fixed coral or something before you like put this whole apparatus over the animal. But the good thing is with an animal like, you know, like these ribbon eels, they just stay in their hole. And so that's a great one to practice this with, because, you know, they are actually, you know, permanent basically, and they will stay there. If they don't like it, they can go in their hole, and then, you know, you've ruined it. This guy was very cooperative. You know, it's great when you've got a cooperative subject that just stays there and almost enjoys the limelight. And you can get this effect. I love this image for that effect.
Yeah.
One other tip.
Simon, could I ask a couple of questions? So this you had it, you had the strobe on the arm, you're still attached on camera, or were you starting to now go into the world of, you know, off-camera strobes and all the rest of it, or is this still done on arm? I think you mentioned arm was right out, but
well, that's a very good point actually, because if you've got a buddy or a dive master. Like if you're diving in Lembe, for example, they're really like reducing the amount of divers. So very often the place that I go just does two divers per dive master. So you can actually get the dive master to hold it for you, right? And that is quite convenient because that means you can get him to guide the light into the area you want, but then you can still change the framing and the angle, and that is quite nice. Obviously, that's luxury diving. You don't always have that luxury, but when you do, and when you're diving as a buddy team, you can totally unclamp and give the strobe to the other person. I only find what happens is then you start communicating and then you start working, and there's a tiny animal in the middle. You need to be careful that you don't drop your 20-kilo apparatus right on top of its head, which again with the ribbon it would be okay because it could just disappear, but other animals will be harder. That's in this case I did it by myself, but I have done it where you give it to a dive master. And also some people only have very short arms. I generally go quite generous with my arms because that's really useful if you have the reach. But it's really weird because like camera's totally lopsided. It takes some time.
So I heard a rumor that you traveled everywhere with an assistant that carried your bag from the minute you left your door out of Hong Kong to the dive site.
Yeah. No, the assistant is called Simon, and he carries everything really well. He does a really fabulous job at setting up my equipment for me. No, that luxury is not there. But you can definitely buddy up in teams to do that.
I find it really difficult to do that because then you're chasing the light, depending. I mean, if you have somebody who knows what they're doing, you're still chasing their light. So I found that if I create my own erector set with extra arms and loosen them up just enough so that I can point them where I want on the subject, then I just have to hope for the subject to stay put, in one particular area and not move around. But yeah. I've also, with the snooting, I'll add a second light and I'll turn it so that it's facing outward. And so that I'll just get just the edge and to get that see that rim of light you've got on this shot here, Simon? So I'll put it off to the side.
I don't remember if I did that here. I do that sometimes as well, just to create like sort of a fake sunlight in the area. But this was I think also in Lembe, if I remember correctly, and the substrate in the reef is really crappy there. It's not nice, so you really do end up doing these dark shots all the time, which I agree does get boring sometimes. But yeah, no, I do that as well sometimes, pointing the strobe up or just putting it really far behind and just sort of very gently lighting the area. Yeah, no, I do. Actually, I'm going to show one where I am doing the combining images. But before, I'm going to show an image, which now that you're saying it, I actually think my buddy Adam Broadbent, who started Zoo Blue scuba diving later, I think actually this was a shot where I gave him my snoot. I think so, because this is an animal that's not as stationary and is moving around. The reason I show this is now shooting almost entirely through the animal. I call that X-ray style. I mean, it's not a shot that you want to do all the time, but it's kind of cool to see because you can see sort of the insides of the animal. You can see the guts. You can see the eye. I tried it in Hong Kong when we had ghost pipefish last year, and you could even see the eggs when they're holding it with their fins like that. So it's kind of an interesting way to play, but if I remember correctly, actually, I think Adam was holding that and I was sort of going with the animal and he was following. And that's of course super convenient when you can do that.
Nobody understands me underwater. I can do hand signals all day long.
And but then there's a sand pops up, but the snoot is like such a complicated apparatus, and if you don't use, you have to clip it off, and then you lose parts, and it's quite a bit of stuff. I wanted to show a picture of the same effect essentially, but just using my spotting torch. So this is a large seahorse in Manado, and like they always look the same, these images, it's seahorse, sitting on the ground, doing nothing, and what's really special are these spiky bits all around. This is a Thorn Seahorse. So I just tried, this is broad daylight, middle of the day, right? So I just tuned the camera all the way down, just put the torch behind, and then you just need to play. But again, this is a relatively stationary subject. If the seahorse is cooperative, it's upright. If it's not cooperative, it's lying on the floor and it's super annoying. But this guy was just fine. And this is like, like a $40 torch. I mean, this is like the simplest thing. And this picture you could take with a compact, any camera, I would say, but you're creating something truly unique. I mean, I've sold prints of this, and that's really not difficult to make. It still takes patience and takes some editing. Obviously, it is not super clean. You've got to clean up some things and so on. But it's a super cool effect where, again, something you could never do in wide angle, very difficult. You can only do it against the sunlight, perhaps, unless you go crazy, and put some giant lights on the reef somewhere. I don't think you could ever recreate something like that underwater. So, the invitation to everybody to just, use the tools that you carry with you anyway. Spotting torch. I have actually like a little adapter that I put on to make smaller ones for smaller subjects, but this one is big enough to just use a big torch.
It's a beautiful image, Simon, and it's like you say, like that's unique. Like there's thousands of seahorse photos, but that I've seen it published and everything else, and straight away I know it's yours, right? And that's the trick, right? How do you? There's millions of macro photos being taken at the moment and some beautiful ones, but to truly stand out of the crowd, it needs something like that. And yeah, it's a pretty special photo, mate. It really is.
Thank you. But like I said, it's easy to make, and then you can do it. I mean, there's some crazy seahorses in the Mediterranean. I'd love to do this technique. The one with the really long, I don't even know what you call these. Yeah. I'd love to do a background light on that one. Anyway, here I'm putting it all together. So here I'm using 2 torches to light up the bottle, because it's quite tricky. You see the long arm octopus in there, or coconut, I'm not sure which one it is. You can see it in there, but when you shoot it with your normal, light, it just looks flat. It doesn't look great. And you want to have that factor in that, it's the beer bottle, I think, as well. It has a green color, but that just doesn't really come out if you shoot the light from the front. So what I was doing here is like, I first took pictures just with the 2 torches. So I have one torch coming in from the side, shining into the bottle body, and another one from behind. You can sort of see the second one's light there, but I was really working without the strobe. That's kind of the point that I want to make here. I was shooting without the strobe first to try and get the background lighting right. That makes it also a not dark picture then, right? But primarily I'm making sure this bottle is actually fully lit up. And then I'm putting the snoot just to highlight the face. And that's how it kind of all comes together. And that's why I wanted to show this image, because, build the stuff up in a row. I always think you should work on your background lighting first. Because you could easily do like the torchlight that I just did on the seahorse. You could do that first and then still do something from the front. But you always want to do the background first and then add your key subject lighting at the end. So that's how you can control the background, or in this case, sort of the subject habitat. And then you put your highlight onto the subject. I really like this image.
Yeah, I love it too. And yeah, you touch on something. When I do like courses, I actually try to talk through. Think about a photo has 2 exposures. The one that you're going to do with the camera and the lighting that's there, be that constant light or ambient light, and you want to expose for that for your background. And then your second exposure is done with your strobe, and obviously that strobe too can freeze the image as well. So you might have, you've used constant light here to light up the background. You may have used a longer exposure to create a bit of movement in the background and so on, and pull out a bit more light. But then you can actually just freeze that subject with just your strobe alone, right? And a lot of people don't realize that you could be shooting 1/10, 1/15 of a second, and you can still get a razor sharp image by just that strobe opening up for that split second that it does, right? So yeah, I kind of like that notion of, think of 2 exposures, and that changes your photography and goes from just, nice ID photos to very creative photos like this amazing photo from you, Simon. It's great.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, we have millions of photos available to practice, you know. Not Susan started photography when it was still a role, you know. You had 36 shots per dive. That was it, you know. Now we can do thousands of shots in a dive. So just shoot and check on your screen. The other day I was doing a talk with Tobias Friedrich, who was, you know, one of the big photographers. And he was like, make sure you look on that screen. You know, you need to zoom in. He zooms in on his camera screen to make sure that the right thing is in focus, because that's the worst. If you spend all this time and you come home and then you look at it and you're like, oh, that's actually the wrong thing in focus, right? Particularly in macro, that happens quite often. So you need to double check that as well. Anyway, I'm going to go to the next one, which is a different way of bringing light and color in. So Susan's going to be happy for this one because it's got background lighting, even though it's a macro shot. And I call this one "Put Your Hands Up for Detroit" because, you know, it's the lure from the orange frogfish is sort of going up and down. And in the back, you've got disco lights. I call this disco bokeh. People call it different things. But essentially what we do is we put something artificial into the background. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but I think it's quite fun to do. So I try to buy like glitter material, but it needs to be something that's actually permanent, so it doesn't come off and, you know, ruin the environment. So I usually buy I go to like a clothing store or like a costume area or textile where these things are sewed on so they don't come off. And I don't buy glued bits. So stuff that doesn't like trail off. And then I clip that to a little slate, which you can stick in the sand. And then you need to either use a torch or, again, use like a strobe to make these things sparkle, and then shoot it with a wide aperture. And then you can get sort of this bokeh effect. So this doesn't have any special lens. There's certain lenses like the trio plan that people use, but that's, I think, overkill unless you're, you know, doing this for a living. But this is an effect, again, you could do with any compact camera. I'm also using a snoot again to spotlight the, you know, the disco frog. But the background is just lit with a torch. So your options here. Final one is something that that was actually kindly chosen as the poster image, I think because it had a lot of black. This was actually a chance photo. You know, I just had a 60mm macro on, and we were coming back from a night dive in Komodo. Pretty mediocre night dive, really. And we're swimming back to the boat. I mean, we'd already surfaced, and then it was like, oh, the boat's there 30 meters or something. So my client, or my guest, was like snorkeling ahead of me, but I always find it easier just to dive right under the surface. So I'm like swimming, and suddenly this tiny little orange thing comes between his legs, you know, and like I immediately knew what it was. Never seen it before. I only seen pictures. This is a Penatus batfish baby. You know, it's an insane animal. The fact that it's completely outlined, I mean, it's just insane. The grown-ups are also insane, but your photography is kind of limited. It's always the same, you know, all you have is this outline. Some people do like sort of a black shot, so you just see the outline. And other than that, you know, it's just like, oh yeah, it's got a margin. Anyway, what I had always envisioned in my head was if I would ever get to see one of these things, I would do a slow shutter picture because these things wiggle, and the point why they have this outline is that, you know, when you do that in a motion, it confuses predators. They just don't really know what to look at, and they'll give up. So as soon as the thing sees you, it will start doing this, which is perfect for slow shutter photography because we can try to get that motion in. But doing that just below the surface and getting the right exposure time, I can tell you, is a real tricky task. Took me lots and lots of photos to get anything remotely. I mean, I would have even wanted some more swooshing there if possible, but it's so hard. You need to find your right exposure, which was 1/10 in this case, but then you need to strobe light it, get that right. I ended up actually using one strobe that worked better for me, and a quite strong video light. So the trailing bit is much better if you've got artificial light in, because otherwise you just will never get the trailing bit in. So you need to actually flood it with light so that this trailing bit will be recorded, and then freeze it. But then you have to be careful not to overpower. It's really tricky. But anyway, it worked out. And this is also light because that is not different light sources. It is in a way, but it's also deciding how long do I let that light come in and having those effects. So that's why I picked that as my closing shot. And I'd like to thank you guys for paying attention to my part of the talk, and invite you to follow me on any of these many beautiful social media tags that you can see here. And then I will pass on to Brett. There you go, Brett. I'm going to stop sharing. You can go ahead.
Thanks, Simon. Pretty tough to follow those sets of images, but I'll try my best. But thanks, Simon, for setting the bar way too high. I thought I'd start with your photo.
Saying that to make me feel good.
Yeah, I'm just let's talk about this photo again. I'm just going to outsource and talk about your photo, right? Now, beautiful photo, and again, I really love. I'm playing around a lot with long exposure, more in wide angle. I really love to play with long exposure and introduce stuff there. Like here we've got weedy sea dragons and so on. Yeah, to me it's a really favorite hit and miss technique. You can do a lot of photos, and trust me, they come out just as a blur, and you kind of go, God, I remember taking blurry photos when I first started. Here I am years later, and I still can't take a sharp shot. So it tests you, and you got to continue to adapt and learn. So it's really good. I wanted to start off with maybe try to combine a lot of the things that Simon, Susan, and Alan have spoken about in some images. Is again, how do you create a different element? How do you combine a lot of those techniques of lighting, composition, exposure, and create a unique shot? And one photo or one subject that I love photographing is squid, and you'll see a lot of my macro photos that I like to share are generally non-stationary subjects. So it introduces a whole lot of challenges, not necessarily just black water as well, but in a lot of different parts of the ocean. I like to shoot moving subjects. Nudibranchs are great. You can sit there, they're beautiful, they're colorful. But for me, I love the challenge of a moving subject and trying to capture their personality. And, this is a pretty typical standard shot. And, the other thing bit of tip I always put about is think about who your audience is. Am I trying to appeal to a diver that has seen these subjects and understand what they are? Or am I trying to shoot for someone that doesn't understand the ocean and try to get them interested in photography or interested in underwater and going through diving? So the style of photography I do and the way I frame is very different based on audience. But with these, squid are actually, if anyone's tried to ever photograph them, can be a really, really tricky subject to expose, mainly because they've got these dishes of eyes, which are like little mirrors. So, your strobe positioning is really, really important, and your exposure is really, really tricky, because you'll probably find you come out with images where the eyes are completely blown out, which you can't recover in post. And you might have a nice body. So my number one tip for squid is underexpose, get your strobes not directly in front, get them out and kick them out and wide and start going in. And then it's
so often a decision that you have to consciously make is overexposed or underexposed, and squid and all these guys are absolute candidates for underexposing, because how many times have you come out and be like, oh, I got a killer shot like yours with the 3 squid, and then the first one just has complete white eyes, like, oh, and nothing you can do about it.
Exactly.
So particularly if you're full framing, you really always should underexpose these guys, whereas other things you should overexpose.
Yeah, totally. And these days, modern cameras, their dynamic range, you've got a fair bit to kick in. Within limit. Obviously, if you're doing a photo, again, think about what you're shooting and what you're shooting for. If you're shooting for competition, you obviously need to understand your tolerances of how much is allowed around, moving the dials. So that's something you've got to keep in mind. So there you want to really get it in camera as best as you can. There it's about strobe positioning and everything else, so that you've got your 25% tolerance, so you're not getting through the finals call and getting that disappointed I never got through the next stage because it wasn't, it was deemed as over edited. So, do really, I think, take that time to really think about your strobe positioning, where they're hitting the light and so on. But again, for me, I want to go back to a photo, typical front on, typical sort of nice portraiture sort of photo, nice background there with 2 other supporting squid. But then when we get nice and tight and look at different angle, I really love shooting upwards, right? It captures a unique kind of character of these squids. And if you know squids too, you're going to have some that are players, some that are not players. Some, as soon as you approach with the light, they take off. You get others that come in and want to hang out with you. And this fellow is one of those. Now, I'm like Susan. I love isolation and negative space, but I also love seeing a bit of contrast in the background, a bit like Simon's shot of that octopus pulling something here. So this is actually a squid directly underneath, shooting straight up, and you can see that kind of lit up at the background, the sparkles. They're actually from my bubbles up on the surface and being lit up by the strobe. So again, it just creates a different isolation, makes this really go to another planet almost. It makes it unearthly. You know, again, is this going to be, when I show a photo of this to someone who's not a diver or not a photographer, it takes them a long time to understand, what is this? Where was it shot? So, you know, I typically find black background equals confusion for non-divers. Blue backgrounds, automatically they go, oh, I'm in the ocean. This is going to be something, you know, it takes them to that place pretty quickly. Now, this is a combination, a bit similar to, oh, I'm getting feedback. Sorry, Alan. I might need to go back on mute, Alan. Thanks, mate. So this is a combination of what Simon spoke about too, around long exposure, similar to his last image. Is here I'm using a long exposure technique. I've got a freeze frame happening with the strobe directly actually underneath and shooting up, which has kind of exposed the eye. But then I've kind of made it a bit psychedelic, which isn't my usual style to go this extreme, but it kind of like it how it came out, using a very long exposure with a video light coming directly above as well to kind of combine. So you can see I've got the sharpness on the eye. You know, the tentacles are kind of nice and sharp through, but then a nice movement. And then obviously the body is just popping this color. So something a little bit different to create something a little bit unique for a squid shot.
What do you think you shot that at?
Off memory, I think that was around 1/10 of a second. Yeah, and I had a 1/10 to me is that magic number. Even for macro and for wide angle to get to capture some movement, particularly when you've got a good strong video light on this, which I had
Did you move the camera?
No, that was purely, that's all the squid. That's the squid's movement at that point. Yeah. So the squid was kind of just hovering up and down a little bit. So that allowed to get that movement without me having to go with it. There's obviously other times where, you know, I've done stuff with blue bottles and everything else. And yeah, your movement you really introduce with the camera, not the subject.
Brett, are you also using rear curtain shutter with that?
No, that was front. That was front, not rear.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The other side, I kind of call these shots like, whilst, you know, nice shot, nothing too unique or special about it. But what I like to talk about these photos is thinking about single light source. So a lot of us are tuned into, I bought 2 strobes, I've got to always use them. Here it's done in an isolation. It's not quite a snoot. I've used a restrictor on the retro strobe to you know, narrow the beam. This was taken in full daylight. But I like to talk about, really look at lighting as part of the art form and controlling it, narrowing it in many different ways, direction, so on, intensity. But a good way to kind of look, I call this like a Mona Lisa shot. If you go and look at Mona Lisa as a painting and go back and look at it consciously now, thinking about lighting. And when you think of painting, most people don't think of lighting, but actually it's very, very prominent in portraiture painting. Go back and look at the picture of Mona Lisa and take a real note of the single light source and how it's coming across. And that's really what sets that painting into a league of its own. So again, think about that in your photography. Now, this is one of my favorite subjects. And yeah, this.
So I want to be so bad.
Yeah, we've been really lucky over the last couple of years to be getting thousands of these washing up on our local beaches, and I've got a whole new series. But this one was shot 6.5 years ago. I got out of hospital the day before and was not in a good shape, but heard they were there, got into a rock pool, and managed to capture this shot. And what's different about this shot for every glaucus photo I'd ever seen before, so this is called a glaucus, it's a part of the nudibranch family, they float on the surface and you're actually seeing the underside, which is normally the bit that floats on the surface, and they counter shaded and everything else. Really amazing little animal. But this shot, every glaucus photo, amazing glaucus photo I'd seen, and even had won underwater photo comps, weren't actually underwater photos. They were because they float on the surface, maybe people are taking a photo from the top and light it up and nice. I wanted to get a shot of it underwater with a reflection. And this is actually, it started doing backflips. And so I happened to capture that moment as it just came back up to the surface and paused and created this angel sort of movement. And hence why you can then kind of see its face right up against the underside. So it's a very, it's a mind bend of a photo, but pretty cool, but very difficult to be shooting on the surface. And speaking of shooting on the surface,
love the symmetry on that.
Got pretty lucky. Everything just lined up, and it's that split second, right? As I said, it's doing these back rolls and somersaults, and then all of a sudden just stops.
What time of the year is that?
For us, I think this was normally around February, March. We get a stream of these. We're actually got a little citizen science project at the moment, trying to track and predict them. So yeah, my wife's kind of running that project. It's pretty cool. Very, very amazing animal. And this is a set of this photo is of a baby seahorse. This is a couple of day old seahorse here. We're talking less than a centimeter, well under an inch for those in the US. So a very small animal, couple of days old. Amazing experience down in Victoria, cold water diving, actually not even diving, snorkeling for this photo. But again, I really love playing around with mirroring near the surface. So I find that surface is explored very much in free diving, very much in wide angle photography. But I actually think there's a whole world of really untapped into macro photography around where the two worlds meet, the underwater and the top side. Hence the glaucus is on the top side. I've got a whole series around blue bottles, but also wanted to introduce these seahorses that kind of float around right near the surface as they're young babies in this little pier down in Victoria. So yeah, pretty lucky to be getting it right up on the surface, isolate it from quite a lot of richness in the water, a lot of food, but it was pretty lucky to kind of capture this thing.
Are you on a snorkel here? Because I always find if I forget a snorkel, then the bubbles keep like ruining the
100%.
surface.
Yeah, and that's absolutely, this is on snorkel. You try to do this on scuba. Even funny enough, I remember about 10 minutes before taking this photo, some guys on some CCRs came underneath us, and there's one of them just off-gassed at that very second, and I was about to take photos. So very small bubbles compared to open circuit scuba, but still a little bit of a bubbles, and I'm about to shoot. And actually I had a float of about 8 seahorses on a piece of seagrass, and next minute it just started flying around everywhere. So you're having a snorkel, understanding your environment, and I went down to Victoria to do a dive trip, and I ended up dived once, found the seahorses were on, and I did nothing else for that week except sit in the water for 7 hours on snorkel to capture these images. So you kind of sometimes you got to give up the emotional thing. Hey, I'm on a dive trip, or are you going after a particular image or experience, right? And be prepared to ditch the scuba gear, go old school and chuck a snorkel on, right?
That's commitment.
It is,
Hey,
yeah.
Can I ask you a question? You've mentioned blue bottles a couple of times, and I don't know what you're referring to.
Like the Portuguese man of war.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's what you mean, but all right, that's good.
I did have some photos in here, but I ended up culling it's a couple of minutes before we started the prezzo. I should have left one in there. The other side, and you mentioned this before, eye contact is really key. But again, I also do think introducing eye into the background, this gives perspective to non-divers right now, right? Because when you show macro photography, again, non-divers don't really appreciate how small of that subject is and its uniqueness. So, introducing a diver in the background and their eye, just slightly, obviously, the focus here is still very much about the eye of the animal, but I want to introduce a background element while still being natural. I think that's something you want to look at. And again, we go back to my favorite, the little seahorses. So, that to me, again, I've got a similar photo to here, black background. I've actually got a photo with 24 seahorses on a single piece of seaweed. It's really nice, really unique. But when you introduce a human element into it, this again gives perspective of size, everything. Like, to me, without this photo of my wife in the background, and she's very good at getting the right position for macro photography after years of pushing around and everything else to get in the right spot. She knows exactly what to do. It's great. And we're able to capture an image like this together. So, again, don't be afraid to think your background, think your subject. It's 2 photos, 2 exposures, 2 photos. And that's what I think creates a little bit more of a unique photo. But that to me is
it's pink. The snorkel is too dominant. That pink.
I know. I do have another shot where I've got plenty of other shots with no snorkel in, and I do prefer them.
Oh yeah.
But there's only and I say only, there's only about 12 seahorses in the photo, so it's not enough seahorses. I wanted to show.
Oh wow.
So to me, this was kind of pulling it all together. But yeah, you are right that the snorkel does, which sometimes you want that, right? A bit of contrast against a black wetsuit and so on. But it does distract a little bit. But yeah, Simon, I'll show you other photos later.
Wow.
And that's me. Really, thanks to 8X. Alan, thanks for hosting us. So I love the set of images today, and feel free to hit us up and look forward to chatting.
Yes, thank you for having me too. I appreciate it. It's very nice to be here, and nice to get to meet you folks. And Alan and Simon, we'll be doing some more with Simon soon. Brett, I'm gonna have to talk to you some more for sure.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Yes, from my side as well. Great hanging out.
Well, yeah, I'm back, and I just like to thank all of you for taking the time today to join us and share your amazing photographs with us. Super blown away by so many of the images I've seen today. And I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but the 8X show is happening, and it's finally back after 2 years, and it's happening on the 16th to the 18th of September this year in Singapore. So I really hope to see you guys in person at the show. And for our viewers, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them on our Facebook page, and we'll try our very best to answer them. Stay tuned for the next session happening shortly, Why Liveaboard Diving with Mark Broderson. So thank you once again, Simon, Brett, Susan, and Alan for joining us today, and I hope to see you soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. How do we go?